In the heart of a vast, untamed forest, Lala, a young lion cub, lived with her mother and siblings. The forest was a dense labyrinth of towering trees, their thick canopies casting intricate shadows on the forest floor. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating golden beams that danced on the moss-covered ground. The air was rich with the scent of wet earth, leaves, and the occasional wildflower. Every rustle of leaves or distant call of a bird kept the environment alive. A symphony of sounds that spoke of both tranquility and wildness. Lala was a curious cub, always eager to explore. Her golden fur, still soft and short, shone in the sunlight as she ventured out, her small paws stepping lightly on the ground. Her mother, a wise and gentle lioness, had taught her many things. From the art of stealth to the power of patience. She had learned to listen to the wind, to watch the movements of smaller animals, and to respect the natural world around her. But Lala was different from her siblings. While they were content to stay close to their mother, practicing their hunting skills or lounging under the trees, Lala's mind was always on the move. She longed for adventure and the thrill of discovery. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, Lala decided that today would be different. Today, she would venture beyond the familiar parts of the forest. She knew that the world was much bigger than the area she had seen. And there were places her mother had warned her about. But Lala, driven by an insatiable curiosity, felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. "I'll be careful," she thought to herself, as she padded silently away from the den. The sounds of the forest grew louder as Lala moved deeper into the wilderness. The crunch of twigs beneath her paws and the rustling of leaves overhead seemed to echo in the still morning air. She passed by large trees with bark so thick it seemed ancient. Their roots twisted and gnarled like the veins of the earth itself. Birds called from high branches, and the distant roar of a waterfall reminded her of how vast and powerful the world truly was. Lala's heart raced with excitement as she stepped farther into the unknown. She had crossed the familiar borders of her home, and everything was new, everything was a discovery. She paused to sniff the air. The scent of unfamiliar plants filled her nostrils, and the breeze carried the faintest hint of something dangerous. Lala, however, was not afraid. She was too intrigued by the unknown to let fear take hold. She continued her journey, each step more confident than the last. As she ventured deeper, the forest began to change. The trees grew taller and the underbrush thicker. The shadows became darker, and the sounds of the forest took on a different tone. The air was heavier, filled with the scent of damp moss and earth. It was clear that Lala had entered a part of the forest that was more wild, more untamed. She stopped at a clearing and saw a small creek winding through the area. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and Lala leaned down to take a drink. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes behind her made Lala freeze. Her sharp eyes scanned the area, and she caught sight of a pair of glowing eyes peering from the shadows. Her fur stood on end, but she didn't move. It was a creature she had never seen before. A sleek, dark figure with a low growl that vibrated in the air. Lala knew immediately that this was a predator. But she didn't feel fear. Instead, she felt a thrill, a rush of adrenaline that made her senses sharper. She had heard stories from her mother about the dangers of the wild. But she had never imagined that she would come face to face with one so soon. The creature, a large wildcat, moved closer, its muscles rippling beneath its coat. Lala held her ground, her instincts telling her to remain calm and still. She had been trained to be patient, to wait for the right moment. The wildcat, sensing her stillness, circled around her, its eyes never leaving her. Lala knew she had to make a decision. Should she run back to her family? Or should she stand her ground and face this challenge head-on? In that moment, something inside Lala clicked. She realized that this was her chance to prove what she had learned. To show that she could be strong and brave. Just like her mother, with a swift movement, she leapt to the side, using the wildcat's momentary distraction to her advantage. The wildcat lunged, but Lala was quicker, darting out of the way just in time. Her heart pounded in her chest. But she kept her focus. The wildcat growled, frustrated by Lala's speed and agility. It took a step back, assessing its prey, but Lala, though smaller, was quicker and more agile. She knew that in this forest, speed was just as valuable as strength. And with that thought, she made her move. She darted to the side again, this time managing to swipe at the wildcat with her claws, just enough to catch its flank. The wildcat hissed and retreated, realizing that Lala was not an easy target. Breathing heavily, Lala watched as the wildcat slunk back into the shadows. Her heart was still racing, but she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had faced the danger, stood her ground, and won. This moment was a turning point for Lala. She had learned something important, that the world was full of challenges. But with courage and cleverness, she could overcome them. As the wildcat disappeared into the depths of the forest, Lala took a deep breath and continued her journey. She had learned that there was much more to the forest than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just a place of beauty and wonder. It was also a place of danger and unpredictability. But it was in this wildness that Lala felt truly alive. After hours of exploring, Lala finally realized that it was time to head back. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor. She turned and began the journey home, but not without a newfound sense of pride. She had faced the unknown and returned stronger for it. As she neared her den, Lala felt a deep connection to the forest, knowing that it was both her playground and her teacher. When Lala returned to her mother and siblings, they were waiting for her. Her mother, though concerned, didn't scold her. Instead, she smiled, seeing the spark of growth in her daughter's eyes. "You've learned something today, haven't you?" she asked softly. Lala nodded, her chest swelling with pride. "Yes, I have," she replied. "I've learned that I can handle anything if I face it head-on." Her mother's gaze softened. "And that's the first step to becoming who you were meant to be." In the days that followed, Lala continued to explore the forest, but now with a deeper understanding of its wildness. The forest was no longer just a place of mystery. It was a teacher, guiding her toward the lion she would one day become. And with each new challenge she faced, Lala grew stronger, wiser, and more confident, always carrying with her the lessons learned in the heart of the wild. Lala had always felt a sense of adventure stirring inside her as she wandered the vast, untamed expanse of the forest. The trees whispered stories of ancient times, and the rustling leaves beneath her paws sounded like an invitation to explore the world beyond her den. She had ventured far from her family, exploring new areas she had never seen before, embracing the thrill of the unknown. But nothing could have prepared her for the encounter she was about to face. It was a warm afternoon, and Lala, with her usual curiosity, was trotting through a dense thicket of trees. The scent of wildflowers filled the air, and the distant sound of a flowing stream invited her to explore even deeper into the forest. Her golden fur glowed in the dappled sunlight, and her tail flicked with excitement as she ventured further into the wild. As she walked, Lala came across a clearing. The sight before her was both familiar and unfamiliar, a large group of wild boars. They were rooting through the earth, their large, muscular bodies digging for roots and small animals. Their grunts filled the air, and the sound of their hooves against the ground was rhythmic and almost calming. For a moment, Lala simply watched them from a distance. Intrigued by their behavior, she had seen these creatures from afar before, but never up close. The wild boars were so engrossed in their search for food that they didn't notice her presence. Lala, feeling a sense of mischief, crept a little closer. Her paws moved silently over the forest floor, and her sharp eyes observed the boars with great interest. She had been taught by her mother to be cautious around unfamiliar animals. But her curiosity got the better of her. As it always did, she wanted to see how the boars interacted, what they did when they were together. As Lala edged closer, one of the boars, a large, dark-colored male, suddenly lifted its head. His sharp eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, there was silence between them. The other boars continued to dig in the earth, unaware of the tension that was building. The male boar's nostrils flared, and his ears twitched. He let out a low, guttural grunt that made Lala's fur bristle. It was as if he had sensed something was wrong. Lala's heart began to race. She wasn't sure what had caught the boar's attention, but the sudden shift in its demeanor told her that something was about to happen. Before she could move, the male boar charged. With terrifying speed, the wild boar closed the distance between them. Its large, powerful body pushed through the underbrush, and Lala barely had time to react. The male boar's tusks were bared, sharp and menacing. As it lunged toward her, Lala tried to dodge, but she wasn't quick enough. Her paws slipped on the slick earth, and in an instant, she was knocked off balance and sent tumbling to the ground. A searing pain shot through her body as one of the boar's tusks scraped against her leg. The sharp point of the tusk tore into her flesh, and Lala let out a startled cry. Blood began to seep from the wound, and the pain was overwhelming. She tried to scramble to her feet, but her injured leg couldn't support her. She felt a wave of panic wash over her as the boar stood over her. its eyes filled with aggression. Lala's mind raced. She knew that her only chance was to escape. She had to get up, to move quickly, but her leg wouldn't cooperate. The pain was unbearable, and she could barely put weight on it. The boar's growls grew louder as it circled her. Clearly agitated, the other wild boars, still oblivious to the commotion, continued to forage for food, unaware of the danger their companion was causing. Lala tried again to push herself up, but her body was sluggish, her movements weak. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized the gravity of the situation. She was alone, far from her family, and injured. The boar's tusks glistened in the sunlight as it charged at her once more. With a desperate cry, Lala attempted to leap out of the way, but her injured leg gave way. She crumpled back to the ground, unable to escape the impending danger. The male boar paused, its heavy breath coming in short, hot bursts. It snorted, agitated by Lala's attempts to flee, and lunged again. This time, Lala barely managed to avoid the tusks. But she wasn't quick enough. The boar's tusk grazed her side, leaving a deep gash that stung with sharp, fiery pain. Lala's vision blurred, and she felt dizzy. Her body was failing her, and fear threatened to take over. She needed help. She needed to get back to her mother, to safety, but she was trapped, injured and alone. Her mind screamed for her to get up, to fight back, but the pain was too much. She could feel her strength fading, the darkness creeping in at the edges of her consciousness. Just as the boar was about to strike again, a loud roar echoed through the forest. The sound was so powerful, so commanding, that even the wild boar seemed to freeze. Lala's heart leapt in recognition. It was her mother. The lioness appeared like a shadow in the clearing, her body sleek and powerful as she sprinted toward Lala. With a mighty roar, she charged at the wild boar, her muscles rippling with every step. The male boar, seeing the threat, hesitated for a moment before it turned to face the lioness. But it was no match for her strength. In a blur of movement, the lioness pounced on the boar, her claws raking across its back and sinking deep into its flesh. The boar squealed in pain, but the lioness was relentless. With a powerful swipe, she sent the boar tumbling to the ground. The other boars, startled by the commotion, scattered into the forest, disappearing into the underbrush. Lala's mother turned to her, her expression filled with concern. She quickly knelt beside her daughter, her warm, familiar scent enveloping Lala in a comforting embrace. The lioness gently nudged Lala's injured leg, her eyes narrowing with worry. Lala winced at the touch, but she was relieved to see her mother. The pain in her leg was still sharp, but with her mother's presence, the fear began to subside. "I'm here, Lala," her mother whispered softly, her voice soothing and calm. "You're safe now." With great care, the lioness helped Lala to her feet, her strong body supporting her daughter as they made their way back toward the safety of their den. The journey was slow, but Lala's heart was no longer filled with panic. She knew that with her mother by her side, she would be okay. As they walked, Lala's thoughts drifted back to the wild boar attack. She had been caught off guard. Her curiosity had led her into danger. But her mother had saved her. The encounter had been terrifying. But it had also been a lesson. The forest was full of challenges. And not all of them could be faced with strength alone. Sometimes, it was the bond between family that provided the greatest strength. When they finally reached the den, Lala collapsed onto the soft ground. Exhausted but safe, her mother stayed by her side, grooming her gently to ease her pain. "You're strong, Lala," she said softly, "but remember, it's okay to rely on others when you need help." Lala closed her eyes, feeling a sense of warmth and comfort wash over her. She had learned a valuable lesson that day. Even in the face of danger, family would always be there to protect and guide her. And with that knowledge, she knew she would grow stronger, not just as a lion, but as part of a family that would always have her back. Lala's world was a blur of pain and fear. The forest that had once seemed like a playground filled with endless possibilities now felt like an overwhelming maze of shadows and danger. Her leg throbbed with a sharp, unrelenting pain from the wild boar's tusk, and her body was sluggish, unable to move as swiftly as she needed to. The injury made it impossible for her to run. And she had quickly found herself surrounded by the wild boars, large, muscular creatures with dark eyes and dangerous tusks that glinted in the dim light. The wild boars snorted and grunted, their sharp, aggressive gazes fixed on her. They seemed to be closing in, hemming her in with every step. Despite their bulk and strength, they didn't seem intent on killing her right away. They were waiting. Lala could feel their hostility in the way they circled her, their eyes gleaming with suspicion and hunger. She was vulnerable, and the boars knew it. Lala's breathing became shallow as panic began to rise within her. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing through her body like a drum. She tried to move, to stand and run, but her injured leg betrayed her. The pain was too intense, and each movement felt like an insurmountable effort. She stumbled, falling to the ground again, her paws scraping against the earth as she tried to push herself upright. With every failed attempt to escape, the sense of hopelessness deepened inside her. She wasn't sure how long she had been stuck there, trapped in the middle of the forest, surrounded by creatures much larger and stronger than she was. The once quiet forest now felt suffocating, and every rustle of leaves or distant animal call only served to heighten her sense of isolation. Her breath caught in her throat as the fear began to take hold of her. Someone, anyone, Lala thought, her mind spiraling in desperation. She didn't know what else to do. She had always been taught to be brave, to rely on her instincts and strength. Her mother had trained her to be independent, to face the world with confidence. But in this moment, Lala felt utterly powerless. Her strength had failed her, and all the lessons she had learned seemed irrelevant when faced with the harsh reality of her situation. She could not fight back. She could not run. She lifted her head, her eyes scanning the trees around her. There was no sign of her family, no indication that anyone was nearby to help. The sound of her own frantic breathing was the only noise that filled the air, amplifying her feelings of loneliness. She let out a weak, desperate cry, a sound that was barely a whisper against the vast silence of the forest. She knew that no one would hear her. She was alone. The forest, which had once felt like a friend full of secrets and beauty, now seemed like a vast, empty place. The trees stood like silent witnesses to her pain, their branches stretching high above her, indifferent to her plight. The wind, usually a soothing presence, now seemed to carry only whispers of danger, carrying the scent of the wild boar's aggression and the thick, metallic smell of her own blood. Every sound, every movement in the underbrush, made her flinch with fear. Lala's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts: panic, confusion, guilt. She thought of her mother. What would she think when she found out? Would she be angry at Lala for venturing out on her own? For being so reckless? The idea of disappointing her mother filled Lala with shame, adding another layer to the heavy weight of fear that pressed down on her. She had always wanted to prove herself, to show that she could be brave and independent. But now she felt nothing but small and insignificant, trapped by her own inexperience. The wild boar's grunts grew louder as they moved closer, their coarse bristles brushing against the ground, their hooves making soft thuds against the earth. Lala could hear them getting closer, each step causing her heart to race even faster. She closed her eyes for a moment, hoping that somehow, the world would shift, that her mother would appear in a flash of light and whisk her away from this nightmare. But no such miracle came. Instead, the boars closed in even further, their shadows falling over Lala's small, injured form. One of them, a particularly large boar with deep, dark eyes, stepped forward. It sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring, and Lala could feel its gaze fixed on her. There was a moment of stillness, a pause in the air where time seemed to stretch out in an endless silence. The boar's eyes narrowed as it crouched low, its tusks gleaming dangerously in the fading light. Lala's body trembled. She had heard stories of the ferocity of wild boars, how their tusks could pierce through flesh with ease, how they would not hesitate to attack if they felt threatened. In her helpless state, there was nothing she could do to defend herself. She could only watch as the boar's tusks drew closer, its powerful body ready to strike. Tears welled up in Lala's eyes as the overwhelming sense of despair hit her again. She was so young, so small, and she had wandered too far from safety. The forest, once a source of wonder, had become her prison. She felt so alone, so completely abandoned. The world seemed too big for her to handle, too cruel, too full of danger. But even in the face of this dire situation, a small spark of defiance still burned within her. Despite the fear and the hopelessness, despite the overwhelming sense of helplessness, Lala refused to give in. She may have been injured, she may have been trapped, but she was still a lion. She was still her mother's daughter. And her mother had taught her to be strong, to survive. Lala's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a distant roar, a deep, powerful sound that echoed through the trees. The wild boars froze, their ears twitching at the sound. The air shifted. Lala's heart skipped a beat. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, A small thread of hope wove its way into her chest. She knew that roar. It was the roar of her mother. The boars, sensing the presence of a larger, more powerful threat, began to retreat. They snorted and huffed in annoyance. But none of them dared to move closer to Lala. The tension in the air broke as Lala's mother appeared from the shadows of the trees. Her golden fur gleaming in the fading light. The lioness's eyes blazed with fury as she surveyed the scene, her powerful body radiating strength and determination. In a heartbeat, the wild boars scattered, disappearing into the forest with a panicked rustle. Lala's mother moved swiftly to her side, her large, strong body enveloping Lala in a protective embrace. The lioness nuzzled her daughter gently, reassuring her with the warmth and safety of her presence. Lala, despite her pain and exhaustion, leaned into her mother, feeling the relief wash over her. "Shush, it's okay," her mother murmured, her voice soft but filled with authority. "I'm here, you're safe now." Lala closed her eyes, her heart still pounding but now filled with a sense of comfort and love. She had been so afraid, so lost in her own fear and helplessness. But now she was safe. Her mother had come for her. She wasn't alone. The forest, once a place of danger and isolation, now seemed to offer a glimmer of hope. Lala knew that the world was still full of challenges. But with her mother by her side, she felt that she could face anything, even in her darkest moment. She had learned that love and family would always be there to guide her through the storm. And as they walked back to the den, Lala's heart began to heal, both from the pain of her injury and from the fear that had taken hold of her. She wasn't alone, and she never would be again. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The quiet of the wilderness was broken only by the sounds of distant birds and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Lala, despite the fear and pain that still clung to her like a shadow, could feel the comforting warmth of her mother beside her, her body radiating protection. She had been saved, but the pain from her injured leg was still very much present, throbbing with every breath she took. Lala's mother continued to nuzzle her gently, her eyes scanning the forest, ever watchful for danger. The wild boars had retreated, but the danger still felt real. Lala knew that the forest was unpredictable, that even in moments of safety, it could turn on you without warning. Yet, in the presence of her mother, Lala felt a deep sense of comfort. For now, she was safe, but safety would not last long. Suddenly, there was a rustling in the bushes. At first, Lala thought it was just another animal passing by. But the sound grew louder, more urgent, and within moments, a group of people emerged from the thicket. Their presence was unexpected, startling. They were not the animals of the forest, nor were they part of her family. Lala froze, her heart pounding again as the group of strangers approached. The humans were moving quickly, but with a calm and deliberate purpose. Their eyes were focused, their expressions serious but compassionate. They were dressed in khaki uniforms, and the equipment they carried, medical bags, stretchers, and other tools, made it clear that they were not here by accident. These were people who knew what they were doing, and they were not about to let Lala's injury go untreated. Lala's mother stood up immediately, her body tense and alert. She let out a low growl, warning the humans that she would not let them come any closer without a fight. She wasn't sure what they wanted, but she was not going to let anyone threaten her cub, not even if they had good intentions. One of the humans, a woman with short brown hair and soft brown eyes, stopped in her tracks. She held her hands up in a gesture of peace, her voice calm but firm. "We're here to help," she said gently. "We're not going to hurt her." Lala's mother watched them closely, her gaze filled with suspicion. She had seen humans before, but never so close, and certainly never in such a vulnerable situation. The lioness hesitated for a moment, her body still poised to protect her cub, but there was something in the woman's voice, something reassuring, that made her pause. The woman's gaze shifted to Lala, who was still lying on the ground, her leg injured and her eyes wide with both fear and confusion. Slowly, the woman crouched down, speaking in a soft, soothing tone, trying to calm both the lioness and Lala. "It's okay, little one," she murmured. "We're here to help you. We've been trained for this. We're not here to harm you." Lala's mother, still cautious, finally took a step back, realizing that these humans were not an immediate threat. But she remained close, her body tense and ready to intervene if necessary. The woman signaled to her team, who began to prepare their medical equipment. A man with glasses and a calm demeanor knelt beside Lala and assessed her injury. Lala could barely comprehend what was happening. She had never been this close to humans before, and in her weakened state, she felt a strange mix of fear and uncertainty. She could see the care in their eyes, but everything was so foreign, so new. The woman reached out carefully, her hands steady, and placed a soft cloth on Lala's injured leg, applying gentle pressure to stop the bleeding. The coldness of the cloth felt oddly comforting against Lala's warm skin. But the pain in her leg still burned like fire. "Don't worry," the man beside her said gently. "We'll stop the bleeding, and then we can get you to a safe place." Lala's eyes flicked to her mother, seeking reassurance. Her mother's gaze was fixed on the humans, watching every move they made. The lioness was still wary, but her posture had relaxed slightly. She was not attacking, not yet, but her protective instincts remained strong. The woman worked quickly and efficiently, wrapping a bandage around Lala's injured leg with careful hands. Lala winced at the pressure, but she stayed still, trusting that these strange humans meant her no harm. There was a sense of authority in the way they moved, a quiet confidence that told Lala they had done this before. They knew how to handle injured animals, especially wild ones. "We'll need to move her to the truck," the woman said to the rest of the team. "We can treat her injuries properly there and get her to the Wildlife Rescue Center." The team worked seamlessly, moving in unison to help Lala. One of the men carefully placed a stretcher under her, while another man prepared the vehicle for transport. Lala's heart raced as she was gently lifted from the ground, her body cradled by the team of experts. Her mother was still watching. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't interfere. The bond between them was strong. But even the lioness could see that Lala was in no condition to walk on her own. The woman had been kind. And she wasn't sure if these humans could be trusted. But there was no denying that they were trying to help. Lala's mind was foggy from the pain and the shock of everything that had happened. She had been alone in the wilderness, surrounded by danger, and now she was being carried away by these strangers. The ground beneath her felt unsteady, and her mother was no longer by her side. It was an odd feeling, like being caught between two worlds, one that she knew and one that she didn't understand. As the team carefully loaded her into the back of the truck, the woman turned to the lioness. She spoke softly, her voice calm but firm. "She'll be safe. We'll take care of her." The lioness hesitated, her sharp eyes watching the truck as it started to drive away. She knew her cub was in good hands. But the protectiveness that every mother felt was difficult to shake. With a final, lingering glance, the lioness retreated into the forest, keeping her distance but never straying far from where her daughter had gone. The ride to the Wildlife Rescue Center was a blur. Lala drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain in her leg dulling slightly with the bandages. But the trauma of the event still weighed heavily on her. She had been so close to danger, so close to being lost. The humans around her worked in silence, their movements precise and efficient as they continued to tend to her injury. At the rescue center, Lala was carefully carried into a large medical area. Here, the humans had everything they needed to treat injured animals: clean, sterile equipment, and a team of medical professionals trained to handle wildlife in distress. Lala was placed gently on a soft bed, and the woman who had first approached her examined her leg with great care. "Just a few more stitches, and she'll be stable," the woman murmured to her team. "We'll give her pain relief and monitor her for the next few hours. She's young, but she's strong. She'll recover." Lala, exhausted and overwhelmed, felt a sense of safety in the care she was receiving. She didn't fully understand where she was or why these humans were helping her. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone anymore, she was being taken care of. And even though her journey was far from over, the human intervention had changed everything. It had given her a chance to heal, to recover, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to return to the wild where she truly belonged. Lala woke up to a world that smelled different, cleaner, more sterile. The air wasn't filled with the scent of wildflowers and damp earth like the forest she had once known, but with the faint smell of antiseptic and the sterile tang of a place built for healing. For a moment, she was disoriented, not sure where she was. But as her senses sharpened, she realized that her leg, though still tender, no longer felt as excruciatingly painful as it had before. She opened her eyes slowly, squinting against the bright lights above her. Around her, the sounds of gentle voices filled the air. There were no gruff animal growls or the sharp, harsh sounds of the wilderness, only calm voices and soft footsteps. The fear that had initially gripped her heart when the humans had approached her seemed to fade with each passing day. Lala wasn't sure how long she had been here, But she had begun to recognize the soothing tones of the staff who had cared for her since her arrival at the Wildlife Rescue Center. She had been terrified at first, unsure of what to make of the humans who had found her and tended to her injury. The first few days were filled with fear. Every time they entered her space, Lala shrank back, her heart racing, her instincts telling her to run. She had been raised in the wild, taught to fear humans as potential threats. The scent of their strange clothes, their steady hands, their unfamiliar voices, it all felt like an invasion of her world. But slowly, the humans showed her kindness. They spoke softly to her, their voices gentle and non-threatening, their movements slow and deliberate. They treated her with respect, never forcing their touch on her, but always offering her the care she needed. The pain in her leg gradually started to subside as the veterinarians worked tirelessly to treat the wound that had nearly cost her life. They cleaned the wound, stitched it up, and applied ointments to speed her recovery. As the days passed, Lala began to notice something else. She was getting stronger. The throbbing pain was replaced by a dull ache that was more manageable. She could move her leg again, albeit slowly and with some caution. The first time she took a step after the injury, her heart had skipped a beat. It had been so long since she had walked freely, since she had felt the earth beneath her paws without the sharp, searing pain of that wild boar's tusk. Though her steps were careful and hesitant, they were steps toward recovery. Lala began to trust the humans. At least a little. They weren't the monsters she had once imagined them to be. They were trying to help her, to heal her, and for that, she was grateful, even though the gratitude was still shrouded by her instinctual wariness. During her recovery, Lala was placed in a large, enclosed area that resembled a small section of the forest, a safe space where she could regain her strength and learn how to live in this new world that had been thrust upon her. It was a far cry from the untamed wilderness she had known. But it was filled with trees and rocks, patches of grass, and other animals who had also been rescued or rehabilitated. Lala would spend her days exploring her enclosure, occasionally stopping to rest in the shade of a tree or to drink from a small pond nearby. At first, she would flinch at the sound of approaching humans, her body tensing in alarm. But over time, their presence became less of a threat and more of a comfort. They always seemed to know what she needed, when she was hungry, when she was thirsty, or when she simply needed attention. They took care of her in ways that felt safe and nurturing. As the weeks went by, Lala's fear began to lessen. She still watched the humans closely, but her body no longer stiffened at their touch. She could see that they meant her no harm, and as she watched the other animals in the center, some of them with similar injuries, others just in need of a safe space to heal, Lala began to realize that this place wasn't so bad. In fact, it had become her refuge, a sanctuary where she could heal both physically and emotionally. Her days in the center became more predictable. Every morning, a human would enter with food for her, fresh meat, vegetables, and sometimes treats. At first, Lala had been hesitant to eat in front of them, still too wary of their presence. But hunger quickly overcame her fear, and she began to eat with relish, her body responding to the nourishment. The food was plentiful, and she grew stronger with each passing day. Her muscles began to fill out. Her golden coat regained its luster, and the weight she had lost in her fight with the wild boar was slowly coming back. Despite the comforts of the center, Lala couldn't forget the wild forest that had been her home. It tugged at her heart every time she stared out beyond the enclosure, looking at the distant trees that seemed to call to her. The wilderness, the wildness of the world, was still there, just beyond her reach, but she wasn't ready yet. She knew that. Her body still carried the evidence of her ordeal, the scar on her leg, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked beyond the safety of the center. She had been lucky to survive, and she knew that if she was ever to return to the wild, she would need to be stronger, more capable, and fully healed. The humans at the center spoke to her in soothing tones, telling her that one day, she would be ready to return to the wild. "You'll be strong again," one of the veterinarians told her, patting her gently on the back. "We're giving you the chance to heal. And when the time comes, we'll help you return to your home." Those words filled Lala with both hope and uncertainty. She didn't know when the time would come, or if she would ever truly be ready. But she knew that the day would eventually come when she would have to make the decision to stay in the safe embrace of the center or return to the wild, where the dangers were as real as the beauty. And so, the days passed, and Lala grew stronger. She practiced her movements, stretching her legs, running short distances in her enclosure. She climbed the rocks that had once seemed so intimidating, learning to use her strength and agility again. The humans encouraged her, offering her gentle praise and the occasional treat when she accomplished something new. They gave her space to explore, but always kept a watchful eye, ready to intervene if needed. Finally, one day, after months of recovery, the humans decided it was time. Lala's wound had healed completely, the scar a faint mark on her leg. She had regained her strength, and though she wasn't quite the same wild lioness she had been, she was close. It was time to return to the forest. The day was overcast, the air thick with the scent of rain. Lala was led to the transport vehicle once more, the same kind of truck that had brought her to the center. This time, however, the purpose was different. This time, the truck would carry her back to the wild, to the very forest where she had been injured, where she had first set out on her adventure. As the truck rumbled through the forest once again, Lala felt a stirring in her chest. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She had healed, she had grown, and now she was ready to return to the world that had once been so dangerous, but also so full of promise. The truck slowed as it approached the spot where Lala had been found, and the doors were opened. Lala stepped out, her paws sinking into the soft earth once more. The familiar scent of the forest filled her nostrils, and she could hear the sounds of birds calling, of the wind rustling through the trees. She was back. Her mother wasn't here yet, but Lala felt the pull of the wild. She took a few tentative steps forward, feeling the strength in her legs, the confidence returning to her with every movement. The wild boars and other dangers would still be there. But Lala knew now that she was capable of facing whatever came her way. She wasn't the same cub that had wandered too far and found herself in danger. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face the world on her own terms. With a final look at the humans who had given her this second chance, Lala turned and began to walk deeper into the forest. She wasn't alone, not anymore. The wild was waiting, and she was ready to reclaim her place within it.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.